Hello and welcome back everyone to Master Game Design, Unreal Engine 5 Stylized Environment and third-person blueprint course. In the last lesson we left ourselves off with setting up a nice foliage mode with all of its plants, and now we're going to actually make use out of them. But before doing that, I'll quickly talk about in regards to how foliage needs to normally be placed out. And usually beginner would start with just placing as much foliage as you can. And usually I've seen a lot of people just placing foliage wherever they can, and they starting out like that to just hide a lot of simplicity within the scene. And basically what ends up happening is they end up just covering this entire section. And let me just go ahead and grab a bit of a larger section. Entire section is what I meant, just grabbing and shoving down as much foliage as they can within the section. But that's not how it usually needs to go. You usually want to make sure that you set it up in the right kind of way, and by that I mean you want to make sure that it's set up in a way that would give you a nice breaking points, so it would look more organic. It would have certain like small islands when you think about them, so it would have like certain type of a look. Maybe you'd have like a bit of patch over here, and you'd also have to consider the elevations. For example, maybe on the top over here it wouldn't look quite as much since it was like the highest part, so maybe it would go more over around this type of a hill, something like that. And next to the ocean maybe you wouldn't want either as much, so maybe you'd go around this section like so, and kind of have a nice rounded off section just like that, more or less this kind of a look. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and make use out of the foliage brush and basically do what I just explained to make sure that we have a nice breaking points within the scene. So first of all, we're just going to go ahead and just place it some random over here and place some like so. And yeah, I'll also talk a little bit in regards to how to set up some of the smaller foliage a little bit as well. Also, whilst making use out of this brush, don't be afraid to use shift and kind of help you break off that kind of rounded off edge. Otherwise, if you were to just use that rounded off brush, as you can see, it's just going to not look quite as nice with the shapes themselves. So just make sure to do that. And I'm just going to go ahead and just maybe add some over here, kind of foliage, just adding a little bit like so. And this looks quite nice. Going to maybe add some bit over here. Going to click one as well, just to see how it looks like. And actually this foliage looks quite nice, so I'm happy with that. Going to maybe add some over here. Going to hold shift, maybe just to remove some parts over like so. Just a little bit like this. And this is going to look much nicer overall. Maybe over here as well. And let's not forget the islands as well. I'm just going to add some like this, but this time I'm going to use a smaller brush to help us break this away, break this up a little bit. So I'm just going to maybe set it up like so. And if we want to have more control over this type of eraser, what we can do is we can go all the way up to the eraser brush. The paint density will also work for eraser as well, and because we used by default value of 0.5, it's basically going to, whilst erasing, it's going to try to keep that 0.5 of a removal. But if we were to set this to a value of 0.1, we can try deleting it, and actually I think it's going to go the other way. If we were to set this to 1 and hold shift, that's not going to work. 0.01, let's try that. Still not going to work the way I want it to be. And actually, we got ourselves eraser density over here on the just under the paint density. So this section over here is going to work in a similar manner to a paint density. So by default, we had a value of 0.5. If we were to change the erase density to 0.5, you'll notice that while holding shift, it's barely going to do anything. And the reason being that the density for this is going to be kept more or less the same. If we were to keep this to a value that's 0.9, for example, you'll notice that it's going to basically not touch anything in regards to the setup. So what I tend to do is just keep it under the default value, so 0.4 perhaps, and just kind of tap it in certain areas where I wanted to help it break me down. In regards to the foliage, maybe a value of 0.2 will do better, and it really depends on the density of the foliage that you set it yourself up with. So in this case, it might be quite a bit more sparse over here. like so, and there you go. We got ourselves a very nice shape. So even just looking at this, for example, over here, maybe it's a bit better as an example, since it has a very nice type of a setup. You'll notice that this over here is green, but then it goes like in a nice kind of a curvature like so. So it gives us a very nice type of transition overall as some greenery, just like that. So all in all, it helps us to break off the shape of the island. And if we look at it from a distance, you can see that it's not just one green type of a blob. And that's exactly what we want within the scene. This desert scene is a small watery island, but it's still a desert, so I'm not going to work too much in regards to populating the scenery with the foliage. The other thing that we need to consider is going to be adding smaller foliage. So luckily the parts on the bottom are smaller foliage within our list, and we can go ahead and select the larger foliage. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of the larger foliage, going to tick it off, and basically it's going to deselect. So only the foliage that's smaller is going to be selected. And quick tip in regards to the paintbrush, if we were to just now paint it out and want to remove it, we can hold shift and just remove all of this. I'm going to set this to 0 for erase enter. We can remove it, but what you'll notice is that it's not actually going to remove any of the trees from this section. The reason being is that while we're painting this, it's actually going to only erase or paint the selected plants, basically. So if we want to erase some of those plants, we can make use out of this, and we'd have to basically tick it back on. And yeah, this is how we're going to be able to have certain control over this section. I tend to have a real nice workflow when working with foliage, when we have certain parts going outwards. So for example, this island over here, oh sorry, that's the original one. So if we were to check this area over here, what I tend to do is, instead of just going randomly and just building blobs like this, instead what I tend to do is just go around next to the sections of the larger biomes. So for example, the smaller biomes would be like over here, because when we think about fertility of the land, we'd have like maybe some patches where there would be like underground water or underground minerals and whatnot, what plants would crave for, and then they'd have larger plants in that sections, and then some basically smaller plants going around it. But I tend to just keep it a little bit more simple and just have some smaller parts just coming out of the main biomes, basically. So usually I would have maybe like over here, like certain biome over here, and maybe like have a bit of a thicker patch coming out of it as well, just to help us break off the shape. And yeah, using this kind of idea, I'm just going to go ahead and just use it to make sure we set ourselves up with those kind of a look, which ends up looking real nice from distance. This is not going to be a playable area for a player, but that's how I tend to usually do for biomes whenever I'm working on them, basically. So this is looking quite nice. Maybe I'll add small patch over here just to help us break this down. And the most important part is going to be, if we were to click 1, we're going to see that this patch is quite untouched. So I might even just add a bit of certain plants over here. And there we go, we see certain plants over here, and I'm a bit more happy in regards to that. We might even add a little bit next to the city, like so. Just a couple of taps. We might even lower down the paint density, a value of 0.1, so we can just tap it around. And also make sure that the landscape is selected, but static mesh is ticked off, so we wouldn't be placing it on top of the roof zone and whatnot. Otherwise, if we were to click, you can see that